Hello, everybody. Welcome to the next lesson in 8th grade Eureka Math. We are in Module 4, and today we are working on Lesson 8. Lesson 8 is called Linear Equations in Disguise, and it's on pages 71 through 79 of your Module 4 workbook. Now, the linear equations in this lesson are in disguise because when you first see them, might be confused about how to solve them. You might even think that you cannot solve them. But there is a trick where you're going to change what looks complicated into something that you are more familiar with. You're going to change the complex into stuff we've been doing in earlier lessons from this module. So don't be too scared by what you see. I'll show you how to make it less scary. Let's start with our vocabulary. We have 3 vocabulary terms for this lesson. First one we've seen before, it's equation. Now, an equation is a math statement with an equals sign. Equation is a math statement with an equals sign. And you will be seeing equations today. They are linear equations, even though they don't look like it. So you will see equations today that might scare you at first, but don't worry. We'll take care of it. Next vocabulary word is proportion. A proportion means 2 equal ratios or fractions. 2 equal ratios or fractions. So this is what you'll see. One ratio, one fraction equals another ratio / fraction. And we've seen proportions before. You've been studying proportions since 6th grade. These are ratios. We've been talking about it earlier in Module 3 when we were talking about dilations and changing sides and how to find lengths of missing sides. We use proportions. So what you're going to see today is you're going to see proportions that you will have to change. That proportion, you will see a proportion that is also an equation because a proportion has an equal sign. And you will have to solve the proportion. Now, at first, if you see 2 fractions equal, that might look tricky. But I'm going to show you the trick to turn a proportion into an equation that you are familiar with. And the trick is another thing we've talked about before, the multiplication property of equality, the last vocabulary term. We're actually going to keep using all of our properties, but we're really focusing today on the multiplication property of equality, because even though the other properties are important for solving the equation, today our first step is going to be the multiplication property of equality. This is the first step to make a proportion turn into an equation that we can easily solve, just like we've been doing so far in Module 4. So we're going to use the multiplication property of equality to change a proportion into an equation that we know how to work with. And remember, the multiplication property of equality tells us that when A equals B, we can multiply both sides by the same thing and it stays equal. We can multiply both sides of an equation by the same value and it stays equal. That's the multiplication property of equality. So those are our 3 vocabulary words today. As always, you can pause the video if you need to catch up and copy anything else if you did not have time to copy all this stuff. But if you are all, but I'm going to move on. So pause if you need to, and then unpause and move on with me. Today, we will be solving linear equations that really do not look like linear equations. They are in disguise. But we're going to solve them anyway, even though they are in disguise, by using the multiplication property of equality to simplify proportions. So we're going to use this property, simplify proportions, to solve linear equations. And we have to use the multiplication property of equality because it makes it easier. The equations are in disguise. So the multiplication property of equality kind of reveals them to us. It makes it easier for us to see what we're doing. So that's what we're doing today. We did the vocabulary. We did our goal for today. Now, when you are ready, you can pause the video and copy more stuff down. But I'm going to move on to some examples I did for you so you can kind of see what we're doing today all at once. Now, these are the examples that are already completed, so you know what a completed example looks like. But we will do some more examples where I show you step by step. But the next page of your notes are the examples, and you can see we start with example 1. Example 1 looks like the red equation. You can see we have x minus 1 divided by 2 equals x plus 1/3 divided by 4. Now this does not look linear. The red does not look linear. It looks like two fractions equal, so this might freak you out at the beginning. But remember, the secret first step, the most important thing is the first thing you do. We're going to use the multiplication property of equality to simplify it. What we do is we have 2 and 4 in the denominators. So if I multiply this side by 2, this 2 goes away. The denominator 2 goes away. But remember, the multiplication property of equality tells me when I multiply 2 on this side, I have to multiply 2 over here. So that's why we do 2 on both sides. It makes this 2 go away, but a 2 goes up over here, but it's in the numerator. I do the same thing with the 4. There's a 4 in the denominator. To make that 4 go away, I multiply everything by 4, and the 4's cancel. But when I multiply 4 on this side, remember, I need to stay equal, the multiplication property of equality. So 4 on this side means there has to be a 4 on that side. Now these 4's cancel, these 2's cancel, and the 4 and the 2 get multiplied by the numerators. That's why the 4 stays on this side, the 2 stays on this side. This might look familiar to you because it's also something that you might have heard called cross multiplying, where the 4 gets multiplied by this and the 2 gets multiplied by this. It's called cross multiplying. Cross multiplying is the shortcut, but what you are really doing is it's the multiplication property of equality. Cross multiplying is the shortcut way of using the multiplication property of equality. So we're not going to do the shortcut today because I want you to see and I want you to recognize the properties that we've been using. So you can call it cross multiplying if you want to, but it's really the multiplication property of equality getting the denominators into the numerators. So after this, after we do the multiplication property of equality for both sides, the rest of the equation looks like what we've been doing in Module 4 for the last few lessons. We do the distributive property to pass the numbers into the parentheses. We get this. Then we do the subtraction property of equality to move the x term to the other side. We do minus 2x to make 0. Minus 2x makes 2x. Then we use the addition property of equality to get to do minus 4 plus 4 to make a 0. We do plus 4 on that side. You'll see I had to do some fraction math because I want to do 2/3 plus 4. But if I want to add, I have to add denominators that are the same. So instead of 4, I did 12/3. 12/3 is the same as 4 because 12 divided by 3 is 4. But if I do 12/3, it's easy to add with 2/3. 2/3 plus 4 might be complicated, but 2/3 plus 12/3, which is the same as 4, makes 14/3. So I get 2x on the left side, 14/3 on the right. Then I want to get x all by itself, so I do divide by 2. 2x divided by 2 is 1x. 14/3 divided by 2 is the same as multiplying by 1/2, so I get 14/6. Then I want to simplify. 14 is 7 times 2. 6 is 3 times 2. The 2 divided by 2 turns into 1, and I keep 7/3. So x is 7/3. So that is just solving the equation. Now, the first step was the important one. The first step was the tricky one. We turn a proportion into what looks like we turn a proportion into something workable by using the multiplication property of equality. We do I can show you the same thing for example 2, which is over here in the green and the orange. We have 1/5 minus x divided by 7. 2x plus 9 divided by 3. That's a proportion because it's two fractions that are equal. To make the proportion into something I can work with, I do the multiplication property of equality. There's a 7 over here, so I multiply both sides by 7. These 7s cancel, and the 7 moves up here. There's a 3 in the denominator, so I multiply by 3 on both sides. These 3's cancel, and the 3 gets up here. That's the multiplication property of equality. It changes a complicated proportion into something we can work with. We just distribute, pass it in, pass it in. We use the addition property of equality to move the x's to one side. We use the subtraction property of equality to move the 63. Again, we're doing minus 63, so I have to change 63 into a fraction with a 5 in the denominator because 3/5 has a 5. This needs a 5. So I just do negative 63 times 5 to get negative 3/15. These both mean the same thing, but this one is easier to subtract with. 3/5 minus 3/15 is negative 3/12 equals 17x. Then I use the division property. 17x divided by 17 is 1x. Negative 312 divided by 5 is negative 312 over 85. You can see from example 2 that this is exactly what we've been doing in Module 4 so far. We're just solving equations using our properties, which is something you know how to do. You know how to solve equations using the properties. The first step is just what's new, because you're not starting with something that looks easy, you're starting with a proportion. But to make the proportion look simpler, multiplication property of equality to make it more something you recognize. Now, there was a bit of work with adding and subtracting and dividing fractions to get the answers for this, which you might see today on your problem set. If you are struggling with fraction math, make sure you contact me and ask me for help with some of your fraction math. I want to help you with the fraction math. You just need to ask. So if there's any fraction skills that you've forgotten since 5th and 6th grade, talk to me about it. We'll get those skills going. But right now, those are the examples that I did for you all at one time. Let's do a couple examples together. Go on, starting on page 71. Page 71 has example 3, which we are going to solve together. You can see this is a proportion, and you might be like, Mr. Baylor, I don't know how to solve this. And I'm going to tell you, well, remember the first step. This looks complicated, so to simplify it, we're going to use the multiplication property of equality. Now there's a 7x plus 2/3 on that side. So if I multiply by 7x plus 2/3, that cancels because this divided by itself makes 1. So those cancel. But the multiplication property of equality tells me I need to multiply it by this side also. I need to make the same change to both sides. Now on this side it cancels, but on this side it's not in the denominator anymore, so it gets simpler. I also want to make the 8 go away. So I'm going to multiply by 8 also. And the 8 divided by 8 turns into 1 and cancels. But because I multiplied by 8 over here, the multiplication property of equality tells me I need to multiply by 8 on that side also. So you can see that's the multiplication property of equality. Looks a little bit complicated, but it is super worth it because it makes the denominators go away. Now, what I'm left with on this side is 8 times 6 plus x, because everything else got divided to make 1. And on this side, I get 3 times 7x plus 2/3, because the 8's got divided to make a 1. Next step, I'm going to use the distributive property to get rid of my parentheses. I'm going to pass the 8 to everything inside. I'm going to pass the 3 to everything inside. 8 times 6 is 48. 8 times x is 8x. 3 times 7x is 21x. 3 times 2/3 is 2. So there we go. Now you're seeing how all this is exactly what we've been doing so far in Module 4. Because what you need to do right now is you want to get the x terms on one side. So I'm going to get the smallest one gone first. Let's do minus 8x, because 8x minus 8x makes 0. And this is the subtraction property of equality, because I need to do minus 8x on this side also. So this is 48 on the left. 21x minus 8x is 13x plus 2. Well, I'm going to use the subtraction property of equality again, because I want this 2 gone. I only want x's on this side. So do plus 2 minus 2 is 0. Then I have to do 48 minus 2 to keep the equality. I need it to stay equal, so I need to do the same thing to both sides. 48 minus 2 is 46, and I get 13x by itself. Well, I really only want x on this side. So I need to divide by 13, because 13x divided by 13 is 1x. But the division property of equality tells me if I divide by 13 over here, I have to divide by 13 over there. So my solution now is going to be 46 over 13 equals x. That is my solution. And it does not simplify. But you can see how this looks exactly like what we've been doing for several lessons now. We use our properties to simplify, simplify, simplify until we get a solution. Just today, you're starting with proportions that might look confusing. But it's not really confusing, because you know it just takes one of our properties that you've used before to simplify it. So we just start with the multiplication property to simplify our proportion. And now it looks like an equation you know what to do with. So we have a proportion, we simplify it with the multiplication property of equality, and then everything else is like what we've been doing. Let's do another example. Example 4 on the bottom of page 71 is another proportion. Two fractions that are equal to each other. And we want to simplify this. Don't let the fraction part scare you. Just simplify it. And remember the first step today is the multiplication property of equality. Now I have 3x plus 9 and 8 in the denominator. So what I want to do, I want to multiply by 8, and I want to multiply by 3x plus 9. Multiply by 8, multiply by 3x plus 9. What this lets me do is 3x plus 9 divided by 3x plus 9 equals 1, so those cancel. And 8 divided by 8 makes 1, so those cancel. The multiplication property of equality lets me fix it, lets me change it, lets me simplify it so that I get what looks like an easier equation to work with. So on the left side of the equation, the only thing left is 8 times 7. And on the right side, I have a 1 and a 3x plus 9. Well, so now this is obvious what's going to happen, but I should still do it. The distributive property means I'm going to pass the 1 to everything on the inside. But it's really not going to change anything, because 1 times 3x plus 9 is still just 3x plus 9. Also, just for fun, 8 times 7, I'm just going to do the step right here. It's 56. 8 times 7 is 56. Now, after I did the multiplication property of equality, a proportion that looked like it might have scared you turns into a linear equation that you know what to do with. You know that you need to do the minus 9 because you really just want x's on this side. That and the subtraction property of equality tells you that if you do minus 9 over here, you have to do minus 9 over there. So 56 minus 9 is 47. 3x plus 0 is 3x. But really, you just want x on this side. not the 3x. So let's divide by 3. Because 3x divided by 3 is just 1x. But this also shows me I need to use the division property of equality. To keep it equal, I have to divide by 3 on the other side. This gives me my solution, because 47 divided by 3, I'm just going to say is 47 thirds. That's where I'm going to stop, because 47 thirds does not simplify. I can stop right there. And you can see again that this is just the same thing we've been doing for a few lessons. We just have to start with the multiplication property of equality to change the proportion into something we can work with. Multiplication property of equality simplifies proportions. It simplifies proportions. Let's do another example. This time we're going to do something a little bit more practical that we've seen before. Here's example 5 on page 72. Example 5 on page 72 is two similar triangles. How do I know they're similar? They told me right here. That's the similar sign. So I know these are similar, so I know they change in the same way. In other words, I know they are proportional. I know triangle ABC is proportional to triangle A prime, B prime, C prime, which means I can take the pieces of triangle ABC. So I can take, what it means is AB and AC are proportional with A prime, B prime, and A prime, C prime. So these are proportional. So I can use this to find the missing sides. So I take AB. AB is x minus 2. AC is x plus 2. And I know it's proportional with this other one, so I know I get AB prime is 9.5 and A prime C prime is 12. Now what I need to do is I need to use, again, this is a proportion. I want to simplify it, so I'm going to simplify it with the multiplication property of equality. I'm going to multiply this side by x plus 2 to make that cancel, but the multiplication property of equality tells me I need to multiply x plus 2 by the other side. I'm going to multiply this side by 12 so that it cancels. But if I multiply by 12 over here, I have to multiply by 12 over there. So there we go. Multiplication property of equality lets me get rid of the denominators and move them to the numerators on the other sides. So it gives me 12 times x minus 2, that's what's left over, equals 9.5 times x plus 2. Now it is just a matter of using the distributive property to simplify it even more. Pass the 12 to everything on the inside, pass the 9.5 times everything on the inside. So 12 times x is 12x. 12 times negative 2 is negative 24. 9.5 times x is 9.5x. 9.5 times 2 is 19. Now I want to get the x terms on the same side, so I'm going to use the subtraction property of equality. Minus 9.5x on that side to make that a 0. Minus 9.5x on that side because it has to stay equal. So I get 2.5x plus negative 24 equals 19. Now I only want the x term, so let's get the negative 24 out of the way. I'm going to get that gone by doing plus 24 to make a 0. But the addition property of equality tells me that if I do plus 24 on this side, I have to do plus 24 on that side. So after I get that, I get 2.5x equals 43. Now I only want the x on this side. So I need to divide 2.5x by 2.5 because 2.5x divided by 2.5 is 1x. But the division property of equality tells me I need to divide by that side by 2.5 also. If I divide that, I get x equals 17.2. That is the, oh, there it is. X equals 17.2. I used a calculator for that. That is my solution. 43 divided by 2.5 is 17.2. Now I'm ready to find how long the sides are, because x is 17.2, but that doesn't tell me anything about the triangles yet. So what I need to do is I need to say, okay, well, AB. AB is x minus 2. 17.2 minus 2 is 15.2 centimeters. That's how long that side is. Well, AC is x plus 2, which is 17.2 plus 2. So this side, AC, is 19.2 centimeters. So you can see right there, using proportions, I can find missing sides of triangles when I have two similar triangles. But the first step to simplifying your proportions is the multiplication property of equality. That's the multiplication property of equality. Takes a proportion and turns it into something workable that you are familiar with, that you know how to do. So it's multiplication property of equality, then the distributive property, then you use whatever other properties you know to get a solution. Those are some examples that we did, that I did for you. Now what I would like you to do, something maybe a little bit different. I'd like you to do the exercises. There are 4 exercises. One on the bottom of page 272 right here. And there's 3 more, exercise 2, 3, and 4 on page 73. I'd like you to pause the video and work on those exercises independently. I'd like you to practice these exercises on your own. So pause the video, do exercises 1, 2, 3, and 4 on your own. And then when you're done doing the exercises, come back, start the video again, and check your answers. Because I'm going to do, when you come back, I will do exercises 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you can follow along and see what I do and see if you did the same things I did, if you got the same answers as me. So I'd like you to try them first and then watch me do them. So you try first and then you come back and you watch me. That's what I'd like to do right now. So pause the video now, try it on your own, and then when you come back, I'll show you my answers and you can check yours. But I'm going to keep going because I'm doing it in real time. You're pausing, but you're back. Hopefully you paused it. Hopefully you tried these. And I'm going to start working on exercise 1. So check your work. The first thing that you probably should have done is copy the equation again. I like to copy it in the middle to make sure I have enough room to do all the work that I'm going to do. So that's the equation. The first thing I'm going to do is I see this is a proportion, not something I'm super familiar with. So I'm going to use the multiplication property of equality. I'm going to do both. I have 9 and 6 in the denominators, so I'm going to do 6 times 9 times this side, and 6 times 9 times the other side. Both sides get multiplied by 6. Both sides get multiplied by 9. But doing this helps me simplify the proportion, because 9 divided by 9 is 1, so those cancel. 6 divided by 6 is 1, so those cancel. So now I don't have to worry about the proportion. The proportions are gone. What I get instead on the left side is 6 times 2x plus 1. And on the other side, I get 9 times 1 plus negative x. I changed minus x to plus and negative x because I've told you in other lessons, I always like to keep things adding. So instead of doing subtraction, I always try to change to plus negatives. But now I use the multiplication property of equality. The proportion is gone. And this, I know what to work with. Because I know when I see parentheses like this, I need to use the distributive property. The distributive property tells me to pass the 6 to everything in those parentheses and the 9 to everything in those parentheses. 6 times 2x is 12x. 6 times 1 is 6. 9 times 1 is 9. 9 times negative x is negative 9x. Now we need to use another property to simplify it even more. Well, I don't like this negative 9x. I'm going to move it, change it. So I'm going to do plus 9x. Because negative 9x plus 9x makes a 0. But I also know the addition property of equality. If I add 9x over here, I have to add 9x over here. So you should have got your next step, if you're checking your work with me, you should have got 21x plus 6 equals 9. Next step you should have done is you should have said, well, I only want x terms over here. So let me do plus 6 minus 6 to make that a 0. And you need to use the subtraction property of equality because you need to do minus 6 on both sides. So your next step, you should have had 21x equals 3. Now we only want x on this side. We don't need the 21x. So we're going to divide by 21. Because 21x divided by 21 is 1x. But the division property of equality tells me to stay equal, I need to change both sides the same way. So to stay equal, I need to divide this by 21. So x is going to equal 3 over 21. Now that is a good answer. X equals 3 over 21 is a good answer. But there is a better answer. There is a better answer. Because you know that 3 is right there, and that 3 is 3 times 1, and 21 is 3 times 7. If you know your math facts, you know that. So we have a 3 in the numerator and a 3 in the denominator. 3 divided by 3 is a 1. So what's left? 1/7. 1/7 is the best solution. 1/7 is the best solution. So this is good. This is the best because it is a reduced fraction. If you reduce, it makes a better fraction. So I would encourage you to try to reduce whenever possible. Because it will make things easier. So reduce your fractions whenever you possibly can. So that's exercise 1. Hopefully you checked your work and you did a great job. Let's check your work again for the next on page 73, with exercises 2, 3, and 4. So exercise 2, another proportion. I'm going to copy it again over here to maybe give myself a little bit more room. 5 plus 2x divided by 3x minus 1 equals 6 over 7. Again, this is a proportion, which is making me nervous. It's difficult to solve. Let me simplify it by using the multiplication property of equality. Remember, that is the first step of today's math. Start with the multiplication property of equality to simplify your proportions. So there's a 7, so I need to multiply by 7. And there's a 3x plus minus 1, so I need to multiply by 3x minus 1. 7 times 3x minus 1 times everything. Multiplication property of equality tells me I have to do the same thing to both sides. But this is super helpful because I know 7 divided by 7 is 1, so those cancel. 3x minus 1 divided by 3x minus 1 is 1, so those cancel. So what do I keep? I keep the 7 times the 5 plus 2x equals the 6 times the 3x plus negative 1. There we go. Now, this looks like something we've seen before. So I know the next step is the distributive property. So if you're checking your work, you should have done the distributive property next. Distributive property, you should have passed the 7 to the 5 and the 2x, and passed the 6 to the 3x and the 6 to the negative 1. If you did the distributive property correctly, you got 35 plus 14x equals 18x plus negative 6. That's what you get if you did the distributive property correctly. Next thing, we want to move the x's to just one side of the equation. So I always try to move the smallest one 14x is smaller, so I'm going to do 14x minus 14x. But the subtraction property of equality should have told you that you need to do minus 14x on that side also. So if you did that, you should have gotten 35 equals 4x plus negative 6. 35 equals 4x plus negative 6. Well, now I'm going to move the 6 because negative 6 plus 6 makes a 0. Oh, this also made a 0 up here. I should draw my 0. But the addition property of equality tells me if I do plus 6 over here, I have to do plus 6 there. So your next step, you should see 41 equals 4x. But I don't want 4x, I just want x. So I need to divide by 4. But the division property of equality tells me that if I want to stay equal, I need to do both sides divide by 4. So my solution is going to be x equals 41 divided by 4. And that does not simplify. That does not simplify, so we can stop right there. That is what you should have got for exercise 2. If you got that answer, congratulations. If you did not, go back, look and see what I did, and compare it with what you did, and see where it went different. Where did you go a little bit different? And fix it. It's always okay to fix things. But let's move on and check your work for exercise 3. Exercise 3, we had x plus 9 over 12 equals negative 2x minus 1/2 over 3. Again, this is a proportion that I want to simplify. So I'm going to use the first step whenever I need to simplify a proportion. Simplifying a proportion means use the multiplication property of equality. Multiply 3 and multiply 12 because those are the denominators. Multiply 3, multiply 12 because those are the denominators. The 12 divided by 12 divides by 1, makes 1 to simplify this side. 3 divided by 3 makes 1 to simplify that side. So I keep what's left over. Well, on the left side, I have 3 times x plus 9. And on the right side, I have 12 times negative 2x plus a negative 1/2. Now the proportion is gone. It looks much simpler. Let me simplify it a little bit more with the distributive property. Passing the 3 to everything, passing the 12 to everything. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times 9 is 27. 12 times negative 2x is negative 24x. 12 times negative 1/2 is negative 6. So that's what your next step should look like. You should have got 3x plus 27 equals negative 24x plus negative 6. Now, so that's where you should be at. If you got there, great, you're on the right track. If you're not there, see where you made a mistake. But let's keep going to simplify it even more. Remember, we only want x on one side, and I always like to move the smallest one. Now, it might not look like it, but negative 24 is negative, so it is smaller than 3. So to move it, I'm going to add 24x, because negative 24x plus 24x is a 0. And the addition property of equality tells me I do 24 on this, I do plus 24x over here. I want to stay equal, so I need to do plus 24x over there. So I get 27x plus 27 equals negative 6. I only want x terms, so I want to move this 27, so I have to do plus 27 minus 27 to make it 0. And the subtraction property of equality tells me to stay equal, I need to do minus 27 on that side also. So now I get 27 equals, well, a negative 6 and a negative 27 together is negative 33. Oops, forgot the x. It's 27x equals negative 33. But I don't want 27x, I just want x. So I need to divide by 27. And I need to follow the division property of equality. To stay equal, I need to divide this side by 27. So I get x equals negative 33 over 27. Now again, that's if you got that, amazing. You're on the right track. You know what you're doing. If you did not get that, go back and look at where you might have gone off the path. But even if you got this, hopefully you recognize that you're not done yet, because this can be simplified. This is a good answer, but you should recognize that 33, it's negative. 33 is 3 times 11, and 27 is 3 times 9. And 3 divided by 3 is 1. This is reducing the fraction. So what do we have left over? We have negative 11 ninths. That is the best answer because it is reduced. That is the best solution. So this is a good solution, but you should still try to reduce your solution to get the best solution. If you got negative 11 ninths, you did number 3 perfectly. Perfectly. And you are probably ready for the problem set. But still, I still want to check exercise 4 with you because you did it. We might as well check and see how well you did. So again, let me copy the work. We have 8 over 3 minus 4x equals 5 over 2x plus 1/4. Proportions. Proportions. Let's simplify this proportion because I don't want to do this all. This looks complicated. Let's make it simpler by using, remember, the special strategy today, the important step, what we're focusing on, the multiplication property of equality. And we multiply by the denominators. So we need to multiply by 2x plus 1/4, and we need to multiply by 3 minus 4x. And we need to do the same thing on this side. Now this helps us because it simplifies. 2x plus 1/4 divided by 2x plus 1/4 turns into 1, makes it simpler. 3 minus 4x divided by 3 minus 4x makes 1, makes it simpler. So what did we keep after we cross multiplied? After we used the multiplication property of equality, what did we keep? Well, on the left side, we have 8 times 2x plus 1/4. And on the right side, we have 5 times 3 plus negative 4x. Let me straighten up my papers. They got a little cattywampus. So there we go. Now we have, obviously, our next step. We made the proportion. We simplified the proportion. We need to keep simplifying, and the next obvious step is to use the distributive property. Pass the 8 to everything in those parentheses. Pass the 5, everything in those parentheses. So this is what you should have. Now, if you distributed correctly, if you used the distributive property correctly, you should have got 16x plus 2 equals 15 plus negative 20x. That's what you should see if you distributed correctly. If you did not get that, check your distribution and make sure you distributed correctly. But the next step is to move the x's to just one side of the equation. And remember, I always like to move the smallest x. And negative 20 is smaller than 16 because negatives are always smaller than positives. Negative 20x plus 20x is 0. But the addition property of equality tells me that I need to do plus 20x on that side to stay equal. So after the addition property of equality, you should see 36x plus 2 equals 15. 36x plus 2 equals 15. Now I only want x terms, so let's make the 2 go away by subtracting 2 to make a 0. But the subtraction property of equality tells me I need to do minus 2 on that side also. So you should see 36x equals 13 on your paper. But I don't want 36. I don't want to know what 36x is. I want to know just what x is. So I divide by 36. And the division property of equality tells me I need to do the same thing to both sides to stay equal. So x by itself is going to be 13 over 36. And that does not simplify. So that is our solution. So if you got 13 over 36, congratulations. You are doing this perfectly. You know exactly what you are doing. Congratulations. If you did not get 13 over 36, go back and check and see what you might have done wrong, what you might have missed. And if you are still confused, remember, reach out to me and I will help you. But if you feel comfortable with this, if you got the right answers, if you know what you're doing, then you are ready for the problem set. So let's look at that problem set. Page 74 has the lesson summary. Now the lesson summary is really just showing you what we talked about today, but you can look and see. The lesson summary is telling you that you start with a proportion. You start with a proportion. And then after you use cross multiply and use the multiplication property of equality to get something you're familiar with. So you start with a proportion and use the multiplication property of equality. The multiplication property of equality gives you something familiar, something that you can solve. So if you see a proportion, use the multiplication property of equality to get something you're familiar with. That's just the lesson summary. Next page is page 75, which is the exit ticket. So I'm going to slide that to the back, and we'll talk about that last. But on page 77 and page 78 is the homework helper. So the homework helper is super useful for you today because they give you more examples about how to solve proportions. So they give you a proportion, they show you all the steps, and they even show you what they were thinking for the first step. So they show you the proportion, they show you the steps, and they tell you what they were thinking for every step. So use, here we go, another proportion, another explanation. Proportions with triangles, another explanation. So use the homework helper for extra examples. After the homework helper, after you feel good about what you're doing, go to page 79, and that is your problem set. So there are 10 questions on this problem set, 9 proportion equations, and 1 problem with the triangles. But we've practiced all this today in our examples and in our exercises. So you should feel pretty good about doing this. If you've been following along, if you've been checking your work, you should feel pretty confident in this. You should feel very confident in doing this. So do your best on this. And remember, my answers to the problem set are on the Google Classroom. So you can check your work with my work. So you can check your work with mine on the Google Classroom. Just go to the Google Classroom, go to the assignment, and you'll see my answers online for you. After you check all your work and you know you did the problem set super well, then you are probably ready for the exit ticket on page 75. Exit ticket on page 75 is just 3 proportion equations that you need to simplify and solve, which if you've been following along, you know how to do. Just start with the multiplication property of equality and you will be perfectly fine. Again, if you need any help during all this, just reach out to me and I will be more than happy to help you out. But good luck, have fun, and I will see you for the next lesson.